My title is Senior VP of Government and Industry Relations for Maple Leaf Foods. I've been with the company for 11 years and with government before that. Both the British Columbia government and the federal government, always working in agriculture and trade. I'm not an agrologist. My academic training is in economics. And I've dealt with business, regulatory and trade issues. And increasingly in this whole area of social license, which is, I think, the theme for the remaining presentations here this afternoon. What I wanted to talk about is here. I'll give you what I define as the public trust model, kind of an academic orientation to the subject of what is public trust and how does trust correlate to this concept of social license. I'll give you just a quick update on today's Maple Leaf and what we're up to and kind of what we are as a company in Canada today. And then talk about what are these marketplace and societal shifts that we're seeing in our industry and impacting us, particularly as a leading brand player in the packaged meats, fresh and processed meats market in Canada and in fact in North America. And then I want to talk about more specifically then what we're doing about those marketplace and societal shifts, how we're trying to build what we call shared value, and how being different, we believe, is creating that shared value in a unique way. And then that relates to what we're doing in food safety, advancing health and wellness, advancing our people and the communities in which the company operates. This whole issue of treating animals well, animal care, eliminating waste, and then standing up for food security, which is a key new initiative that really kind of ties into our commitment to communities and the well-being of food insecure Canadians. And then finally, I'll just share some of the learnings along the way, and stay tuned for a particular quote from a certain Queen of England that I think is kind of relevant. So what is the public trust model? This is a diagram that comes from the Journal of Rural Sociology, and it's really saying that if the end goal is social license, then the path to achieving social license, and I know Brian is going to talk a bit more about really how to define social license, but what the research shows, there's two key elements. First, you need to demonstrate competence, but you also need to demonstrate that you engender confidence in what you do and how you do it. And that speaks to the values of your organization. Those are the key ingredients to trust. And then with trust, you build social license. It's not the only thing that social license depends on, but it's probably the most important. And this is kind of how Maple Leaf Food thinks about it. In fact, just to elaborate, then, this issue of confidence, really what we find from the research, is the most important element. You can be highly competent, you can have all kinds of wisdom and knowledge, but if fundamentally people don't believe you share their values, then they stop listening to your expertise, right? And they then don't trust you as much as you would like. And I think many of us fall into that trap of just talking and talking, telling them more facts, more expertise, that somehow will convince them that, no, you're wrong about animal welfare, or you just don't understand how food safety works. Well, at that point, people tune out, because you're not speaking from an empathetic position and understanding their concern for you as perhaps a mother that's trying to feed her family and wanting to know that they can trust the source of the food. So that is the model that underpins it. So Maple Leaf Foods today, it's a company that's certainly changed a lot over many years. The origins of the company, well, in some ways, if you go back to the Maple Leaf Mills side, it goes back before 1927, but as a meat-based company, which is what we are solely today. We were many different things over the years. It goes back to 1927. Today we employ 11,500 Canadians. We are the largest prepared meats company in Canada today. As I say, we've gone through various divestitures over the last few years. We owned Canada Bread, for example. We were in the rendering business. We were in animal nutrition. We had a pasta company. We had a few things. But today it is just a prepared meats company. We are today the largest producer of raised without antibiotics pork and RWA poultry. That's a major new innovation and an area of growth tremendous growth. In fact, we can't keep up with the demand. We're the largest producer of halal poultry now, reflecting, a whole new segment of our population in Canada. And we've just completed capital investments of over $1 billion to transition to state-of-the-art facilities. We've closed a number of plants in Canada, but we've poured capital, investment, technology into so-called centers of excellence where we're trying to achieve the scale and efficiencies that make us competitive. This all became really exposed when the Canadian dollar went to par and we were faced with a cost structure that would really not serve us as a viable or profitable company relative to our peers in North America. It's a very different story today. We've now achieved a much higher level of earnings performance. Our stock price is much better, and we feel we've got a real trajectory for growth now. Those are just some of the brands that make up Maple Leaf today, both national brands in pork, poultry, sliced meats, hot dogs, sausages, and so on, and a number of regional brands that are, the legacies of acquisitions over the years that still are quite relevant. So let's now talk about these marketplace and societal shifts. And I thought maybe a good place to start would be what we've learned from our own employees. So when we embarked on a whole new sustainability strategy, we decided that perhaps the most important audience to test first is your own audience, your own employee base, because you're not going to be credible or successful, I don't believe, in charting a new path unless your own employees really believe in it. So the question we asked of all our employees, what are the most important areas of focus for a sustainability strategy and a different kind of meat company that's going to speak differently to consumers? And so these were some of the results. We asked them about diversity and inclusion in our own company, health and safety as a priority, animal wellness, community outreach, and environmental stewardship. And so you can see there that a large number of people, either the yellow or the green, were agreeing or strongly agreeing that to have a sustainability program, it had to address these kinds of things. And that therefore led to a lot of the reflection on how to build this sustainability program. Here was another example where we asked, where do you want us to do more than we're doing now? I mean, we already have various activities in all those areas, but where should we really invest more time and effort? So in this, you started to see from that employee survey, food safety and quality. Well, obviously, everyone knows the crisis Maple Leaf had. There's nothing more important to us in committing really strongly to food safety. After what occurred to our business in 2008, that legacy, and I'll talk a bit more about it, is deeply ingrained in how we think about our responsibility as a company. So that always is very high in the minds of our employees. But employee health and safety, animal wellness, responsive nutrition, environmental compliance, water, wastewater reduction, and we have a pretty young and diversified employee base. We're headquartered in Mississauga, Ontario. We have a very, very diverse employee base. And these are the kind of things they were saying, probably as much as consumers as employees of the company. So it was quite important learnings. So what I wanted to show here, this comes from the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. So a little more data. The Canadian Centre for Food Integrity is this new body nationally that is helping the Canadian agriculture and food industry address these issues of social license through research, through consumer education, and through building up principles for action in all the areas of concern to Canadians today. So this is based on their consumer trust research in 2016. What they found here relates to key concerns of Canadians. So the rising cost of food actually is the number one concern. Of all the big concerns in 2016, even ahead of healthcare costs, energy, the economy in general, the rising cost of food. So that's pretty important to understand. As much as we have many consumers want more variety, they want various things in their food, the cost of food is a very material issue. In fact, it was up 12% compared to the survey done in 2012. Still in the third tier, sort of in this rank of 41 to 50, 45%, you had global warming, animal welfare, sustainable agriculture. Not quite at the top, but in that second tier. So again, this is the kind of evidence that says our marketplace is changing. There's major societal shifts occurring. The market is reacting to concerns. Certainly this affordability issue is driving the way people shop, where they shop, how they shop, and so on. But these other issues of animal welfare and so on I'll come to. So that's just a bit of a fact base on which we started to build this sustainability strategy. Here's a bit more on some of the top concerns as they change. So I mentioned the rising cost of food. Over here, 2012, so concerns about food safety over the 4-year period rose by 9%. Having enough food to feed Canada grew by 5%. People preoccupied about food security, global warming, stuff like that. Humane treatment of animals up 10% as a concern in 4 years. That is real. You know, that's starting to have some impact, and we see it as a meat company, obviously. So here's the one slide that I think is the most impactful or interesting. The Centre for Food Integrity asked Canadians, is the Canadian food system headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? Or not sure. Well, what you have here is the findings from the same research in the US in 2015. There, it was 40% right direction, 27% wrong direction, 30% unsure. In Canada, that middle piece is 50%, which says 50% of our customers, or all the people we serve as an agri-food industry, aren't too sure about this. Well, that's a pretty big number, and it's a kind of glass half full, glass half empty question. I like to see it as a glass half full, meaning they're unsure, but it's a fertile audience to learn more, and that we should be thinking about how are we going to address that, because that's a pretty big question. And if people aren't confident about our industry going in the right or wrong direction, back to the model, well, how much trust do they have, and therefore do we have social license? If we don't address that uncertainty gap, then we have a problem as an industry going forward. We have a political problem as much as a consumer problem. So this is the pillars of the strategy that we adopted as a company. The goal is be a different meat company, and do it would enable it by a robust sustainability strategy. Being different in our world means no hormones or antibiotics. I mean, we're never going to be no, but we're getting to the path of reduced, and we've got a whole story of reduction on antibiotics. All vegetarian feed raised on Canadian farms. Again, we're not universally there, but that's a differentiator that really resonates with more consumers. And we've got a brand strategy behind that to deliver that in several areas. Leadership in animal care, and simpler, more natural products. Again, a lot of reformulation occurring, taking out anything that sounds like a chemical in food has become a real differentiator. It's key to the industry. And then enable that through advancing nutrition and health, valuing our people and communities, treating animals well, and eliminating waste. Those are the key elements, all of which have serious actions, metrics, goals, and public reporting against them. So let's run through them. Food safety. Back to 2008, this is clearly the number one issue that preoccupies our whole company, from the CEO to the bottom. I mean, when you've lived through that, we were accountable for the lives, 23 lives lost. I mean, it's a profoundly impactful situation. And what we really then did was we hired talent, we hired leadership, we built a whole new food safety strategy characterized by the dinner plate. At the core of it is culture. It's, in fact, I was very interested to hear what the head of the National Entity Board talked about safety culture this morning, because at the core, it doesn't matter how good all your actions are, your tools, your investments, if you don't have a culture that is lived and breathed, that's different from before, nothing succeeds. So we invest a lot in that. We keep it alive. We do all kinds of training in every level of the company to make people very conscious of, frankly, what is our legacy as a result of what happened to be a food safety leader. And so that's key. Some examples of what that means in practical terms. We benchmarked all of our operations to GFSI standards since 2011, the Global Food Safety Initiative, which sets the global benchmarking for third-party certification of food safety programs. All our suppliers will be certified by 2017. In 2014, we conducted 180,000 tests for bacteria. Of course, we do intensive environmental swabbing and monitoring to ensure we've got a safe product. We host an annual food safety symposium. We lead every year. We bring together 250 of our peers, our competitors, the regulators, the scientists, and we really try to be a leader in this in the industry. It's not just about us, it's how do we move the whole industry to a better place of food safety. Health and nutrition, I won't read all this, but we're basically driving an approach to our industry that is more focused on making foods which traditionally are not seen particularly as too healthier. We're trying to reduce sodium. We're making simpler ingredients. We're providing a lot more consumer education about healthy balance and the role of meat in the diet and what is appropriate portion control and what are all the negatives and positives of what you consume in our product portfolio. Antibiotic reduction of antibiotic use is a key part of what we're doing in our hog and poultry production. Value in communities, again, being a leader in workplace safety, supporting sustainable food security. I'll talk a bit more about that. We've got a whole new diversity and inclusion strategy internally, really making people, they belong to a very diverse and inclusive organization. And there's a whole bunch of other philanthropic initiatives related to product donations and things like that. I'll come back to that. Treating animals well. We now have what I think is a Canadian leading, or maybe North American leading, animal welfare program. We hired a great new VP of animal care a couple years ago, Dr. Greg Douglas. We've got a 3-year strategy rolling up all kinds of metrics, actions, investments. We're going to remote video auditing. We're going to CO2 stunning in our slaughter plants, comprehensive training, external benchmarking and auditing against what our customers are asking for and what is increasingly demanded under regulation for animal transport and so on and so forth. Eliminating waste. We've set goals to reduce our energy, water, and waste by 50% over 10 years. Very ambitious, and we've got a VP of sustainability now driving this through a whole series of actions. And it's still early days on this journey, but even in 2015, we measured a 10% reduction in our CO2 per kilogram of production. It's the emissions intensity of what we produce down. So we've got a long ways to go, but we're kind of on the way. On the food security, I wanted to mention this. In the fall, we announced the launch of what is kind of a nonprofit NGO in a company. It's the Maple Leaf Center for Action on Food Security. We're committing 1% of pre-tax profit plus another $1.5 million in annual product donations for granting monies for supporting, really becoming the consciousness of Canada on this issue of food security. There's 3 parts: advocacy, innovation, and a learning hub. We've got an independent board of directors with third-party experts. In a way, if you've been, you may know that some companies have taken on, for example, Bell and mental health. Bell Canada has said, we want to be the conscious of Canada when it comes to mental health. RBC has done this for water. We want to do it for food security as an issue in Canada, because there's 4 million Canadian households that are 4 million Canadians that are food insecure. And for a wealthy developed country, we kind of think as a food company, that's a shame. That shouldn't be happening. And we want to change that. We want to lead change. We want to raise consciousness. So this whole initiative has just happened and is part of that, process of building trust. So some learnings along the way in this journey. One, never take public trust for granted. We learned that in spades with our situation in 2008. And because we're so much more connected to consumers, all it takes is somebody at a keyboard to really, make a difference and badly damage your reputation. You have to be, you can't take it for granted. You can't just lecture. You have to be really engaged in listening. You have to commit to a transparency and a level of accountability. Some people call this increasingly radical transparency, like putting out, like we don't do it yet on our website, but if you want to know our Listeria monitoring results, I'll give them to you. Anybody can have them. We report exactly what the latest test results are, because there's no point to us in trying to, it's not going to show perfection. That's the point. It's not perfection, but we're prepared to be very transparent. You have to be really accountable for doing the right thing. And we have a whole set of values in the company to try to underpin that. Define purpose and live those values. So it's got to be real, it's got to be authentic. Employees don't buy it very long if it's not. And I like to think of it as, frankly, more listening, less talking, which is a signal for me to shut up here in a minute and listen to some questions. And the final thing is, This is where the conversation widens. Trust building requires alignment of corporate and industry-wide efforts, including with the Alberta Institute of Development, meaning we can do a lot of things as a corporate player, but we're part of an industry. And if the industry isn't rallied and acting in a common way with common metrics, common purpose, common action, that's the foundation. And all the effort we invest may be eroded if we don't have, our industry working together with us. Queen of England, Queen Victoria said, the important thing is not what they think of me, but what I think of them. And to me, what that speaks to is speaking from a position of leadership and authority where you are listening, you're caring, and you're acting in the best interests of your clients, your customers, your consumers, your employees. And it's a perception that I think Queen Victoria seems to have understood, and I think it's something that we can learn from as leaders in the food industry.